Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. Welcome to New St. Andrews College's Friday Disputatio. My name is Jonathan McIntosh. I'm Fellow of Humanities here at New St. Andrews College, where I teach political philosophy, and it's my privilege to welcome you all to today's Candidate Forum for Moscow City Council. I'm going to pray in a moment and then invite up Dr. Erb. He's going to lead us in singing, and then Thomas Carpenter will come up and explain the format of today's forum. Before that, I do want to welcome you all, welcome especially to visitors for the New St. Andrews College Preview Day. I'm sure we've also got some members of the community who are here for the Candidate Forum, and a very special welcome to our candidates. Thank you so much for coming. Let's give thanks. Father in heaven, we thank you for your grace and truth, and that you have called us to live in the light of that grace and truth. And we thank you for today's Candidate Forum. We thank you that we live in a country and at a time when we have the freedom to hold events like this. We ask you for your blessing on this afternoon's forum. We ask that you would bless the candidates as they communicate their thoughts to us. We thank you for their desire to serve our city in this capacity. Please give us attentive hearts and minds as we consider their words. And thank you for all of this, and we commit our time to you now. In Jesus' name, amen. Dr. Erb.
Hello, everybody. I'm Thomas Carpenter. I am the leading member of the NSA Civics Club, and I will be the moderator this afternoon for the Candidate Forum. First, I'd like to tell you a little bit about the Civics Club and what we do. Serving as a segue between college life and civic life, New St. Andrews Civics Club operates under the college's mission to graduate leaders who shape culture, living faithfully under the lordship of Jesus Christ. Civics Club has two purposes: to understand our place as Christians in our communities, and to understand the structure of how our government works. We invert the typical model of civics education and begin at the local level and work our way up in order to shine the light of Christ in the civic arena without much ado, regardless of campaign signs and regardless of strong party affiliation. The NSA Civics Club would like to welcome you to the 2023 Candidate Forum. The intention for this forum is to provide an opportunity for the candidates to describe their proposed policies and beliefs to voters. The invitation to the event was extended to all candidates for Moscow City Council election, and we are very thankful that you all could attend. At this time, I would like to invite the candidates and panelists on stage. Please be seated behind your name card. They're in alphabetical order by last name. Welcome to our candidates: Bryce Blankenship, Joe Campbell, Drew Davis, Evan Holmes, and Nathan Tupper. And welcome to our panelists: Alexis Daggett, Will McCabe, and Brian Sarche. Each candidate will be given 2 minutes for a self-introduction, and then a total of 6 minutes to answer questions by our panelists. Our timekeeper, Louis Dalby, is seated down here in the second row. When the speaker's time begins, Louis will hold up the green card. When the speaker has 1 minute left, he will hold up the yellow card. And when the speaker has 10 seconds left, he'll hold up the red card. And at time stop, he'll just shout out, "Stop." We haven't had too many of those before. We'll begin our self-introductions with Mr. Blankenship down at the end and work our way across the candidate table. And just a reminder, you guys will have 2 minutes. So please welcome the candidates.
Thank you all so much for coming this afternoon. It's a gorgeous afternoon, so I'm really impressed you all elected to come inside on what's bound to be one of the last remaining gorgeous days of the year. And I also have to commend you. This is by far the most comfortable chair we've been given thus far in all of our forums. So thank you for that. As mentioned, my name is Bryce Blankinship, and I've been in the community for 12 years. I moved here originally from Kansas City, so I've got my Midwestern roots that run pretty deep. But I've loved living here, and I love Moscow for so many different reasons. My professional life is wrapped up. I'm a senior instructor teaching philosophy at the University of Idaho. I teach a lot of the 100, 200 level classes. This semester I'm teaching a 300 level class on existentialism. And I also have worked kind of in the service industry, both here in Moscow and over in Pullman. I managed Nectar restaurant from 2013 through 2016 and a half. That half is important. And then I also took a little bit of time off, and then I've been a principal bartender over at the Black Cypress in Pullman since 2018. So I think with both of my professional outlets, both being connected to the University of Idaho and my time within the service industry here in Moscow and in Pullman, makes me a really great candidate, a really great person to represent Moscow at the city council level. And I'm really excited to potentially be able to do that, and I look forward to talking with you all more this afternoon. Thank you.
Thanks to Jonathan and NSA and to everybody for coming here. It was really a nice crowd. I gave a talk here once. I'm going to talk a little bit about that because I know a fair amount about what great students you are, because people came up and talked to me for years afterwards. Whenever I would go to Bootzer's, people would come with these questions about Cicero and everything. So, but just a few things about me. I just retired, 30 years of teaching. I taught philosophy at WSU. I feel like I was successful in all the main areas of teaching and research and service. I won 2 major teaching awards. I'm just about to sign a contract for my 10th edited book volume. I have done conferences of all sorts. And it might not look like it, but I've had quite a diverse life. I spent the earlier part of my life growing up under the poverty line. I was raised by a single mother, large family. I had a brother in Vietnam, and a sister who was wheelchair bound, another sister who died of breast cancer. The town that I grew up in high school was 40% Jewish. There were 5 synagogues. It was 1 by 1.9 square miles. And then the college that I went to, Livingston College at Rutgers University, 40% black students. But, from literally poverty to where I am right now, I learned that life is a function of abilities and opportunities. Not all opportunities are equal. I'm interested in increasing opportunities, education, housing, transportation. And I think equality of opportunity is crucial, important to democracy, and I'll talk about some of the specifics as we go on. But I'm really glad to be here, and thanks a lot for having me.
Good afternoon. It's great to be here. Thank you to NSA and all those who have taken part in planning this. I know these events take time and effort, and so it's appreciated. My name is Drew Davis. I originally moved here 11 years ago to attend the University of Idaho, where I received a bachelor's and master's degree in architecture, with every intent to leave when I'm done. And I'm happy to, my wife and my 4 kids, we're happy to call this place home today. As I've lived in Moscow, I've participated and worked for a variety of different companies. My focus is on architecture, and that's why originally I was appointed to the City Council last December. My background in infrastructure, buildings, and budgets when it comes to construction is critical and still needed on council today. with talking with Mayor Betke when I was on planning and zoning, the issues that we're facing in our town of growth are incredibly important, that people have a place to live, and that housing is critical to that. In addition to working, truly my office, I think it's right where the stage is. I'm not even kidding you. I work right next door, NIT Designing Community. So when you have events and I'm working here at night, I definitely hear them through the thick brick walls. But in addition to working for NIT Designing Community, I also teach at the University of Idaho as a lecturer, where I teach a grad studio. It's a 6-credit course. And it's quite difficult, I think, for students to take on. And then in the fall, I teach undergrad students a digital media class tailored to architecture. My perspective in creating policy and teaching and practicing architecture in the Northwest is absolutely critical for me as an individual, and I find that my perspective is needed still, and so look forward to discussing more about it today. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for all of you for coming here. It's gratifying to see this wonderful audience. Like Bryce, I came west from the Midwest, motivated by adventure, mountain climbing, backpacking, exploring wild places, and seeking this solace of empty spaces. After a while, my motivation shifted somewhat to service, and I ended up spending 17 years seasonally, off and on, for the National Park Service, and I got to jump from helicopters and rescue climbers and fight fires at Yellowstone and ride horseback over hundreds of miles of trails, all in the name of service, and that was my motivation. At some point you ask yourself, and you'll ask yourself this in your lives, are you a user or are you a provider? So getting to Moscow allowed me to become motivated by community, and the government that guides community begins with family. And so I became motivated by that sense of community and that need, and participated for 30 years in Moscow commissions, boards, food co-op, PCEI, just a whole wide gamut of things. You can find out more about it online. But after all that, and combining those motivations, my motivation today, my motivation for seeking this position is gratitude. You can't go through what I've gone through with my wife of almost 40 years without feeling immense gratitude, and it is the best motivator of all of those. And so once again, I'm grateful to be here today. I'm grateful to see all of you out there, and hope we can have more exchange.
So first of all, I want to thank New St. Andrews for putting on this event. I know this takes a lot of effort, and the amount of coordination that it takes to get this amount of people in one place at one time is immense. So thank you all for attending. I really appreciate it. To start off, about myself, I originally came from Boise, Idaho. I went to the Ambrose School for my kindergarten year to my senior year. After Ambrose, I went to the military. It took a little bit for me to decide on what I wanted to do with myself, and so at a point of a little bit of personal moment of confusion, I took a second to take ownership of my life, and I decided to join the military to serve our state and our country. And currently, I am a sergeant in the Idaho Army National Guard. My job in the military is to provide religious freedoms to soldiers of whatever faith denomination that they follow. Part of being in the military is education benefits, which is one of the best things I've ever experienced in the military. I've now gone to the University of Idaho for the past few years, and I finished out my bachelor's in political science this spring, and I'm finishing 2 last courses in my minor of economics this fall. And I am so happy to be almost done, and I am looking at all the faces, the young faces out here, and I am so excited for all the rest of you to be done. It's such a pleasure. it's a great feeling to walk down the stage and actually get that diploma and actually feel ready to hit the world with everything you've got. It's a great feeling. In the meantime of me doing my degree, I've learned a lot about the city of Moscow, and I've loved every single moment of me being up here. It's been a pleasure to be in Moscow throughout the pandemic, throughout all the crises that we've experienced. And I look forward to being in Moscow for a good while longer. Even if I lose and I don't get everyone's votes, that's okay with me. I'm going to be here for a while. So get used to my face. I'm sorry. Thank you again to NSA, and thank you to the Civics Club for arranging this event. I hope you guys enjoy it. Thank you for your time.
On? Oh, yeah. Mr. Holmes, I have a first question for you. You mentioned the various boards that you served on, and you served on the Board of Adjustment for 9 years prior to running for City Council. How does this, alongside your personal construction experience, equip you to help with housing and development issues in Moscow?
The question was about Board of Adjustment, which is the zoning Board of Adjustment that every city pretty much has. And we review applications for uses of land that are maybe conditional, or we review applications for variances. We try to, on that board, find ways to make things work that may be a little bit irregular. I think that will come into play when we try to come up with creative solutions for development of lands in maybe a quicker fashion or in a different way than they've been done in the past, to avert some of the problems that'll come along with the affordability of housing. For us, it's a talking point, and we all are good at talking about affordable housing and the ripple effects that come from it, but it's a near crisis for some people. In fact, it is a crisis already. So talking about it is one thing, but knowing how to make the machinery work to start establishing solutions is very important right now. The other thing we have to be mindful of is strengthening our social networks so that people that are falling through the cracks because of that need and that those needs are addressed, because that's going to be the first job, I think, that comes with this. Thanks for the question.
Yep. I've got one, or I've got more, but the next one is, in your mission statement on your website, you talk about a culture of inclusion and, quote, creating a pathway for anyone to move forward with their ideas and dreams, end quote. How do you plan to practically accomplish this in Moscow, and where would you like to start?
I love the recursive nature of this question, and I brought it upon myself. How do you start helping people who want to start helping people? Well, there's the first thing I would suggest is we remove impediments for any individual that may feel like they're marginalized and don't have the same opportunities. And some of that you do by your presence and by your welcoming influence and by your assurances that they are included. Other steps that are necessary that you probably all need is to develop, if your dream involves a business, is to develop financial literacy and to learn about those aspects of the world that you don't get at NSA or U of I or where I went, Heidelberg University. So I think we can do that. I also think that we can match people in town who are at retirement age, and I'll be there in 20, 30 years, that have skills, have knowledge, have failed, and can mentor younger people or help pave their way towards realizing what may be a nascent idea, maybe something that came new to them. So there's a number of things we can do, and I think part of it is just the attitude that we put forth.
Thank you, Mr. Holmes. Another question on your website again. You mentioned having experience managing the budget and taxes for 3 businesses. Looking at the Moscow City budget, is there anything you advocate for to be changed or emphasized in order to better steward the city's finances?
The budget isn't, the city's budget isn't set up in a vacuum. You kind of can if you have your own businesses and things like that, but the city's budget is done with a lot of deliberation and with collaboration amongst all the divisions. However, they come up with, at the end of that, an expression of needs that the city council will talk about and eventually vote on, and they have public hearing or public hearings about that. What I would like to do is involve more of the community to those public hearings, and so that you don't seem like idiots when you're there, take a 240-page obtuse document and create a user-friendly, shorter document so that you know what is ahead, what sources of revenue are paying for that, and what sources of revenue come from fees and from taxes and that. So then you get an appreciation for the hardest part of budgeting, and that is all the things you would like to do after you've done the things you have to do with the little bit of money that's left over. And that's where the public hearing is very important. And like I said, I think a lot of people, more people would give input in those yearly public hearings, which essentially set the goal for the city council for the next 12 months, because the money is budgeted for certain things. Well, if the public gets involved at that public hearing and understands what money is left, then they can provide valuable input to that, the whole process then.
Thank you, Mr. Holmes. Do we have time for one more question? Okay. You posed the question on your website, could we address, quote, could we address some of our out-of-reach funding needs with the establishment of a Moscow Community Foundation, end quote. Would you unpack what you mean by this community foundation, and how would you work to establish such an institution, or not?
I'd be thrilled to have such an institution in Moscow. It's not the job of the city council. And I invite all of you to go online and look at, on Facebook or on my website, to see that I'm fond of throwing ideas out there, because at this time, we all get the podium. And it's nice to plant the seeds sometime, elected or not. When you are a candidate, it's a time to be taken seriously and perhaps plant the seeds of an idea that might take root and might germinate. The Moscow Community Foundation, I wouldn't want to be in conflict with any other charitable giving organizations that we have here, but I would like to use donated money, bequest, money that maybe we didn't know that people had out there that were really ready to donate, and rather than spending it right away in a foundation, you would invest it so that it becomes a longer-term giving program. The Hamilton Indoor Rec Center, the pool, the 1912 Center, the community building that is City Hall, the ice arena, those are all ideas that sat bubbling on the surface that the city council couldn't do anything with as much as they would like to, until private money came along. And I maintain that private money may come along more often if we have a pot to throw it into, and I'd like to see it invested for the future.
Thank you, Mr. Holmes.
All right. And next we'll have Mr. Bryce Blankinship.
Woo! I was going to give a woo. All right, there's the woo. All right, very good.
All right. Well, Mr. Blankinship, you emphasize diversity and listening to different viewpoints on your website. How do you practically plan to implement these ideas, and how do you hope to combat the possibility of controversy and political polarization in your capacity as a counselor?
Great. I appreciate the question, Brian. So I think my strength, or one of my strengths as an educator at the University of Idaho, especially teaching philosophy, and I know a lot of NSA students take philosophy classes in a variety of capacities, And I think one of my strengths as an educator and one of my strengths as a philosophy educator in particular is one of the joys, especially at a public institution like the University of Idaho, is there is a diversity of values that are espoused in ways that you might not find totally in a private institution such as NSA. And because of that, I get to kind of be in this space of discovery. I get to be in this space of allowing people with very different viewpoints from, all sorts of backgrounds, whether that be from various parts of Idaho, whether that be rural Idaho, whether that be more urban areas, etc., backgrounds of people having faith, not having faith. And so I get to be in this space where there's just a tenacity of different viewpoints. And the classes that I get to teach, sometimes debates break out, sometimes discussions definitely happen. And as you all know, one of the joys of philosophy is disagreement, right? And sometimes that happens very much so in the classroom. But one of my strengths, I think, as an educator, and one of my duties as an educator is, again, to kind of like work through those issues, work through those spaces where there's a diversity of perspectives in the classroom, where we can either delineate to a new perspective altogether, or at least we all respect each other's different perspectives that are being brought to the table and being brought to the discourse. And so as a city councilor, I would take that skill set where there are those different pockets clearly throughout Moscow of people having differing perspectives. And frankly, I think one of the main keys is listening. And I think that oftentimes we don't listen all too well. We like to be heard rather than hearing. And so I think that kind of being in that space of being able to bring people together, to offer a space, and to be a conduit by which I can hopefully be adjudicating between different perspectives, I think is a really useful skill set that I think is unique to what I bring. So I'm excited to be in that position for Moscow in a lot of different ways.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
On a similar note, on your website you talk about governing and representing intergenerationally if you get elected. As, I guess, a somewhat younger candidate, how do you plan on doing that?
Yeah, I appreciate that. Honestly, one of the things that I love about Moscow and in general just kind of love about the life that so many of us get to live, and I know that this is the same for many of you, both my experience on campus and then also in the service industry, I legitimately have friends, and I should say I'll be a bit transparent. I'm in my mid-30s. Ooh, crazy. But I legitimately have friends that are 20, 21, 22. I also have friends legitimately that are 65 to 85, like people that I would count on. And I think existing in a town and existing in a space, in a place that where you can have that intergenerational relationship is actually really unique and frankly really uncommon. And Moscow, I think, is this really unique place that allows that to flourish in a lot of differing capacities. And so, and I think that's clearly one of the ways that one of the reasons why I love Moscow so much as well, is that, I can go to work at the Black Cypress and I can work with, some 21, 22-year-olds, and then the next day I can go down to Vine down here and have wine with a good buddy that's 76, right? And I just think that that's such a neat life that we get to live. And I know that maybe that resonates with many of you as well, and I think that's a really special thing that Moscow offers.
Thank you. On a slightly different note, can you tell us about your business experience with Nectar and Black Cypress and how that experience has informed you when it comes to running for political office?
Absolutely. This is a little bit of a sideways way to answer that question, but frankly, it's about people. It's about relationships. And I think that my time in the service industry, and this spans back to my years in Kansas City as well, working, and I managed a coffee shop out of undergraduate school where I did my undergraduate. I worked as a manager in a coffee shop for 2.5 years. And frankly, all of my time in the service industry, whether that be at that coffee shop or whether that be at Nectar or whether that be at the Black Cypress, it's all about people. It's all about relationships. It's all about connection. And clearly, like, especially in, a business setting, there's going to be people that come in that you might not agree with. There might be people that come in that you do agree with. There might be people that you work with that you don't agree with. There might be people that you work with that you do agree with. And so I think that my main takeaway from my years working in the service industry is definitely about relationships. It's about connections. And I think that my ability to connect to a diversity of viewpoints, to a diversity of people, is certainly a strong suit, and it's something that I don't take for granted in any capacity, and I do think that I can kind of be in a really good position to represent a vast array of people on city council because of my connections with and my excitement for relationships and for people.
Thank you so much. On that note, you seem very people-oriented. Is
Truth.
that partially what brings you to run for office, and why specifically a city position?
Yeah, great. So yes is the answer to the first part. Because I think that life is better shared with others, right? And I think that the way that we can connect can enhance experience, whatever that may look like and however that may look like. And when I started thinking about, how I wanted to continue to invest in Moscow, how I wanted to kind of continue to build my own future here in Moscow, I kept thinking about what it would look like to be invested at the city level. And so I met with people that have been on council, people that are currently on council, and just kind of from their experience, it got me pretty excited to see what this would be like. And the more that I learned, the neat thing about local government is that it directly impacts all of our lives, right? Like clearly I think we get really focused on like stuff that's happening at the state level or at the federal level or at the global level because like that's spicy and that's intense and controversial, right? But like frankly, we all want good water to drink, right? And so we want effective ways of managing that. We want effective ways of thinking about, these things that I think in our daily lives we kind of take for granted. But at a city level, those are the things that matter. And so kind of like the impact that I feel like I might have as a city councilor is definitely related to what can be done on that very practical sense.
Thank you so much for your time.
You're welcome. Thank you.
All right. Next, we'll have Nathan Tupper. Okay. So, according to your website, your platform emphasizes the importance of integrating the student community with the city. How do you plan to encourage interaction between the students and the city as a counselor if you get elected?
Well, I think on the first and I think most important note is that there's a reputation among politicians to be old crotchety men that have no relation to the youth, and I hope by being elected I can help alleviate that fear a little bit. But secondly, I also hope to be myself integrated with the community in a lot of ways by going out to businesses, by going out to places and public events where voters are at, and especially young voters. My background is in the university. I also know a lot of places in the city itself that young voters hang out at. Being the kind of person that is publicly available is very important to me, and that is the biggest way I'd say is just being the kind of person that goes out to the community and not just expects the community to come to me with concerns. As much as I want the community to come with me to concerns, it's important for us as elected officials to also go out as well, I'd say.
Awesome. You also wrote on your campaign website that you will always advocate for policies that will enable our citizens to flourish without acting as a burden to our taxpayers. Could you unpack that statement a bit for us? What's an example of such a policy that you would advocate for?
Yeah, thank you for that question. That's a very big question, because what I see in my time here in Moscow is that we are lacking behind in infrastructure. We're lacking behind in general amenities. And there is this website that I've actually found out about this week through another moderator called Lift Local Idaho. And if you look up their website, they are an organization, a private organization that shows where Idaho cities need infrastructure needs met. And it's not just for Moscow, it's for every Idaho city. But I personally really like this resource. I've looked at it myself in the meantime. And I've seen how we can use this private entity to talk to elected officials, whether it's a city councilman or it's our federal or state representatives that go to Boise, and ask them to look at our needs, to look at what Moscow needs. Another policy that I've been debating about, but I've kind of thought about, there has been some initiative for a 1 cent sales tax in the city. Very small burden. 1 cent is, like, frankly, with inflation, 1 cent is not a lot to a lot of us, I'm willing to bet. But 1 cent sales tax to say, hey, we're going to give this to the city to reinvest into infrastructure. And I think that is a simple way that we can help each other out. If there is anything that we could do, I would say the biggest thing that I'd emphasize is volunteering our time as well. The city has a lot of initiatives to help not just the city government itself, but also private organizations. There's a lot of opportunity for young voters, for young students, but not just the youth, but also the older generations as well. You middle-aged voters I see out here as well. There's a lot of opportunity for all of us to help each other out. And I would say that I would be the kind of city councilor that would push for initiatives like that, to help out, to volunteer, to be active in the community, because that is what is most important to me.
Just out of curiosity, is that 1 cent on the dollar or 1 cent per sale?
Per sale.
Cool. Okay, let's see. I went about off script there. To move on, as regards to the ongoing housing crisis, what specific policies would you like to pursue, and how much can the city do to address our housing problems?
Yeah, thank you, Will. This has been a very consistent question for all the candidates. I don't know if you guys know this. There is an ongoing house crisis, not just in Moscow, but in the entire world, I would say. So as far as the city council can be concerned, the biggest thing we can do is, one, argue with our legislatures very much. Politics is always a battle of arguments, it's a battle of wits, and it's a pleasure to always have these conversations. It's very important for us to have. And especially as a local community, look, Moscow is a very active community. It's a beautiful thing to see. And I think it'll be on all of us to argue what our needs are. But some specific things I would like to see meetings between renters, property developers, and the government itself to talk about the needs of renters. I came into the city when I was 19, and I struggled to find a spot to rent. It was hard, and I had to work to the bone to ensure that I could live here. And I think that's a shame. I think it's a shame that I had to fight so hard to just simply have a bed to sleep in. So I think it'd be very important for renters, property developers, and the city government itself to have meetings together to talk about the needs. But I also think housing itself is an economic problem. We can look at all of the stages of housing development and property development and try to look at what the needs are of the construction companies, the developers themselves, and try to see where we can invite private firms that'll increase competition in all of those steps to ensure that prices of development gets lowered. I think that'd be very helpful for our housing development, and I think that is a step that even us as a city council can initiate, simply inviting people to join our community. I think that's very important, especially if we want to see this community grow, which I think we all do. I especially would like to see it, as I am myself a product of that growth, and I fell in love with the place, and I'd love for more people to fall in love with Moscow.
Okay. Okay, that's the 1 minute mark, so maybe we'll end it there, but thank you very much.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, oh, hang on, never mind.
Please welcome Councilwoman Sandra Kelly.
Oh.
I was worried about that too.
Well, Ms. Kelly, thank you for arriving in the nick of time.
Oh, thank you.
And without further ado, we have some questions for you.
I'm sure that's true.
Ms. Kelly, as a now 2-term council member, what have you accomplished over your council career to commend yourself for re-election? And what are some things that you're most proud of that you've accomplished?
Thank you so much. Before I answer that question, I really do want to apologize for being late. One of the great things I get to do is kind of run the Vandal Food Pantry, and I had a really great thing happen where I might be able to feed a lot of international students over the holiday break, and it went longer than expected. So I do apologize, and I appreciate and I'm just going to assume you understand about that, so thank you. Some of the things that I'm proud of, I thought about this a lot because a lot of times on city council, really you're thinking about streets, making sure that even though you think there are a lot of potholes, we're actually fixing potholes. And even though you're probably not thinking about sewage, I'm always thinking about sewage. And even though you might think the snowplows never actually get down your street, I know they're getting down our streets and I know how hard they work. And so those aren't exactly accomplishments as a city councilor, but those are things I think about a lot. But in terms of accomplishments, there was one thing that really stood out. When COVID happened, as most of you know, governments and cities, we received money that we could use. And Moscow had a fair amount. And at first, all of it was going to go to good things, radio towers and helping with roads and helping with infrastructure, and most of it went there. But at the time, my partner and I, Brandy Sullivan on the council, we said, hey, what we really want to do is find a way to give at least started with $500,000, but we upped it to $750,000 to allow small businesses and our nonprofits that were really, really hurt. I mean, I think everyone was hurt, but those small businesses and nonprofits were really hurt. And we wanted to make a way where they could write in a grant and get some money. And I'm the first to admit that grants were clunky, right? If we had it to do over, I'd make the grants a lot easier. But it really helped a lot of our local downtown nonprofit folks and small businesses. And even though it was clunky and even though I got some complaints on it, I really am thankful that we were able to do that, because a lot of folks weren't able to do that. And we spent $750,000 of those funds right back here into our city, where it will also generate some more money for our city. So I would say that's something that I'm pleased about. I don't like to use the word proud, but I'm really pleased that we were able to accomplish that and have the support for that. And I don't remember the second part of your question. I'm sorry.
I think you got it. I think.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah. On a different note, you mentioned being, quote, all for diversity and understanding in your time at the League of Women Voters Forum. How do you plan to promote this in Moscow, and what is the first area you would start with?
In terms of first area, I'm not sure, only because diverse is a lot of things, and I don't want to get bogged down in one area. But the reason I came up with that answer at the League of Women Voters, and what's prompting me to speak today, is that I know that there have been professors that have interviewed for jobs at the University of Idaho and just didn't feel comfortable being there, and so didn't come. And so that means that students are hurt, that our downtown is hurt, that our university is hurt. I know that there are students that come in from all over, and as you all know, you're students that come in from all over too. You may or may not feel comfortable here. I hope you do. That's my goal. I want you all to feel comfortable here. I want the other students that come in to feel comfortable here, and some felt scared. And that hurts my heart. I don't want people to be scared in Moscow. I don't want them to feel like they don't have a place here. I don't want a friend of mine to come up to me when I was speaking at an event to say, hey, do you want to borrow my Kevlar vest? And I had to think about it. And I said, no, I don't. I trust my town. So I don't want those feelings here, right? I want people to feel safe. I want it to be an eclectic downtown. I want color, and I want different lifestyles, and all gamut of lifestyles, right? We can all be together here. I just want people to feel safe when they do it. I don't want my senior citizen friends to be walking down the street and feel really nervous because, maybe someone's like glaring at them or they're just getting bad vibes. I don't know how to fix bad vibes, right? But I want to. And I do know that we do it collectively. We do it as a community. We do it together. I look at these great men up here. I will say this is the end of the season, and these men are amazing. I am so lucky to be surrounded by such good men up here on the podium, and I felt that from day one. They want to do that work also. So we need to reach together as one whole town, and that's a hard thing to do because we're going to disagree on things, and that's okay. Disagreement's fine as long as we do it in a kind and truthful way. We can all get along and we can all share, and that's what I want to do. And I'm working on the how.
Thank you. On an even different note, again in that same League of Women Voters Forum, you mentioned your love for the parks. How does this inform your opinions on neighborhood development in Moscow?
I do love the parks. You come to these things and you give me a microphone and you just let me talk. You're going to learn more about me than you need to know. But I have the best 5-year-old neighbor that lives across the street from me. His family and I we get along great. We go on these Saturday morning walks together because I have a really bouncy dog and my neighbor has a bouncy 5-year-old. And so we had a lot of the parks. I live right by Rotary Park, but I tell you, the little guy can go all over the place. We've been to a lot of parks, and it wore my dog out, which I'm super thankful for. So I do have a great love for the parks. But in terms of how it affects development, I'm really happy that part of the plan for development is they must bring us a plan on where to put some public space. And sometimes that's a full-fledged park with swings and slides and pretend McDonald places. I play a lot of pretend McDonald's. And place for kids to swing and play. And sometimes it's a grassy spot. And so that's already in place. And our developers have to go by that. And I'm really thankful for the planners of our city that wanted to keep that in there. Because green space is vital. And trees are vital. I know you're probably going to say, Sandra, the trees downtown aren't looking very good. I know. We're working on that too. We do have a plan to remove the dead trees and put new ones in. It just takes time, and we're getting there. But the green spaces are vital. I live also by East City Park, and walking by and seeing the park full of a diverse group of people, I love that. I love walking or biking through the park and visiting with people at the park. It's just, our parks are really, I think, part of the heart of Moscow, and I love that everyone participates in them, and I love that our developers have to put in those green spaces when they build.
Thank you. Finally, what are your thoughts on the recent PBAC presentation to council and the decision to pursue the alternative, which involves pumping water from the Snake River? How would you recommend citizens think about this issue?
I love that. I get to sit on the PBAC committee, and it's the Palouse Basin Aquifer Committee. I love that we can have acronyms because I don't like having to say it that much. I like PBAC a lot better. I will say that it took a little doing. I'm actually in favor of that plan. And before you think I'm completely loony, let me tell you why. We have 2 alternatives that we were working on yesterday. There are 5 total alternatives, and 2 of them stood out. At one point, we were looking at the reservoir and to store water in there and pump it out. But it turns out that in the long run, and maybe not even super long run, that might be even more expensive than pumping water from the Snake River. And the Snake River, that's just a dip in the water. Sorry about the pun. It's crazy to think about putting water up that far into a holding tank and getting it out, but it's very possible. And it will probably be the longest sustaining solution that we can do, which means that it will last the longest. We still have the other alternatives we're working on, and we'll probably dip into those a little bit. But believe it or not, having a great holding tank, being able to pump water up and get it out, we think will actually save us money. And that's why I recommend it.
Thank you, Ms. Kelly.
All right, and now for Dr. Joe Campbell. All right, Dr. Campbell, on your website you state that, quote, "Our future is only as strong as our ability to include diversity at the table," end quote. What does that mean to you? And practically, how do you begin applying that statement?
Yeah, thanks for that question. That's good because it gives me a chance to talk about diversity a little bit. Also on my website, it says community equals liberty plus diversity. So there's a variety of ways in which diversity sort of plays a role in my campaign. And that last thing, toward the end of my teaching, I got really interested in political philosophy and Isaiah Berlin. And I learned from him that, many political problems really just come down to diverse attitudes about liberty. When liberty is restricted, when liberty is enhanced. Those are, fundamental disagreements, I think, that we have. And I think respecting that diversity of attitudes about liberty, I think is really important. But also, I have a all hands on deck attitude about the future. I think that diversity allows for a more comprehensive approach to our problems, a greater chance of solutions. I've applied that. I might talk, if I get a chance, with respect to one of the other questions, talking about my role as an editor and ways in which that thought sort of plays out in that context. And, lastly, I want, honest commentary from all sources if I'm elected. So just to give you sort of an example, I'm really interested in the climate action plan. And we're going to have to do a lot. There are going to be a lot of changes coming up. We have to reduce emissions by 50% by 2035 in the city of Moscow. But some of the future planning, includes constructing, alternative transportation places, bicycles, walk pathways, other kinds of things like that. But if we were to construct these pathways and not take, just to use an example, the NSA students into account, well, you would form your own paths. You wouldn't use the ones. So I think input from all people in the community, finding out how people actually, the way over, if you look in the Arboretum, the way that they created pathways there is they created a few, and then they watched to see where people walked. And then they created the other ones there. Now, we can't do that really on a city level, but we can inquire with people, and that means all people. That means getting a perspective from everybody to make this work, I think.
Thank you so much. On a slightly different note, can you tell us about your book, A Companion to Free Will, and how do you hope your philosophical perspectives will influence your role as a city councilman?
Yeah, this book has occupied a lot of my life in the last good chunk of years. So I'm delighted to talk about it. And I have this little quote I'm going to read just because free will is such a complex topic. I've been talking about it my whole life, and I can get into it and not get out sometimes. But free will is an interesting topic precisely because most people have some view about it, but the views vary widely. You're just as likely to meet a person who is certain to have free will as you are to meet someone who is certain you don't have free will. You will meet people who think it is the most important topic in the world, and people who think it's meaningless precisely because you can seemingly say anything and nothing about it. As I noted before, diversity lies in the heart of most civic disagreements. Questions about when liberties have been impinged, when they've been exploited, I think are central to communities. But further, there's 30 articles in the book, and I made a real attempt to try to capture the religious tradition of thoughts about free will as well as contemporary scientific worries about free will. It was kind of interesting because when I first got into free will, I did not foresee it being sort of, the best example of humanity's working with science that we have today, which is really what it has become. But we're still trying to sort out some of these issues, and I think the book does a great job of taking a variety of perspectives. Another thing is I just have, there are experts, there are rising stars in the book, there are people who with endowed chairs, there are people who are just instructors. All they share is that they have an expertise in free will. And one other thing that I'll say, and this has really been a staple of just my doing conferences, my book volumes, 43% of the people in the book are women. In analytic philosophy, which is what I do, and philosophy in general in the United States, it's like a 75-25 ratio of men to women. So there are a lot of women's voices, a lot of different voices in the book. I'm proud of that.
Well, Dr. Campbell, thank you so much.
All right.
Okay, finally, sure enough, we have Drew Davis, who's on the front of my sheet. Okay, so your website says you've been a small business advocate for a long time now. How do you plan to continue advocating for small businesses as a member of the City Council?
I love this question. So both my parents are entrepreneurs and small business owners, and so my dining room table at night wasn't the same as probably most. It was the boardroom table. And I heard my parents, my dad's he thinks more big picture visionary, my mom's the financial person. And so boardroom table had many disagreements. And so, but what I learned from that is the value of a free market and a free economy. And working, seeing my parents with the small business and how they operated when big box stores came into town, they didn't use it as an excuse. They used it as an opportunity to accelerate their business, and they really focused on the areas that they could succeed on. And so for me as an adult, I work on strategic planning with the firm that I work for. And so it's really evaluating what communities need. For me as a consumer, the example that I like to use is I like Hyperspud a lot. I'm very keen into the outdoor scene, I like to think. And so for me, If I was going to buy cross-country skis, I don't want to buy them from backcountry.com. It was going and talking to Heather, because Heather could answer my questions more than an AI chatbot could, right? That was the value. She could dial in my skis. She knows my name. That's the value of small business. It's just not going out there. It's what they bring to the table, and that's why I value that.
Okay, thank you. Let's see. So you were brought on to council, I think, as you mentioned earlier, via appointment to fill a gap halfway through the last term. What has made you decide to run full term this year?
So it was actually just the last year. It's a 4-year term, so I only served out the last, just for clarification. But not to be specific. But what made me this last year, so as I also mentioned, it's on my website, I was serving on planning and zoning. And there's a lot of issues that came before planning and zoning, then also went to council. And so I was working on issues there. But really, my goal has always been to be on city government on some level. That was accelerated immensely last December when I got a call by Mayor Betke Christmas shopping for my 2-year-old. And I had to give a response in 2 days. And so that opportunity, though, why I feel it's still a need and why I need to be there is I'm a nuts and bolts type of person. We deal a lot with city services. My experience in architecture, infrastructure, and again, being a user of the city with parks, that role is still needed. That focus of architecture is still needed.
Fair enough. So, speaking of infrastructure, we've been asking this one a lot, but your campaign website says that UC Moscow needs a market for affordable housing. How do you plan to solve that problem?
That's a problem that everyone wants to talk about that doesn't have a lot of solutions, I'll be quite honest with you, right? So professionally, I'll start there. In the last 4 years, I've built 500, I haven't personally built them, I should say, I designed them. I'm not that great, but I've designed 500 apartment units on the west side of Washington, mostly the greater Seattle area. That is a difficult jurisdiction to work in, especially in the terms of affordable housing. What that's given me the ability to do is it's prepared me to talk with legislatures in terms of how we need to look at affordable housing. Now, I don't think it's only a policy issue. It's definitely something that needs to be addressed by the private industry. The biggest thing that I see, and I'm telling you, every forum, every email I get, I've had 60 emails in the last 3 weeks, usually about this. And for me, how we need to handle this problem is, with all issues, it needs to be education. And so I feel strongly that we need a housing summit in Moscow. There are lots of ideas about housing that are incorrect of how we can solve affordable housing. Getting professionals to the table, getting policy to the table, addressing those cohesively, educating the public. But again, it has to be and I'm a big fan of P3's, public-private partnerships. And so this is the start of that, and that's the best way I feel forward, is educating the greater public about our housing issues.
Okay, thank you. One more, I think. Okay.
He said 5 more. What was that?
I said one more, but Louis is telling me we've got 2 minutes left, so I'll be quick. Yeah. You mentioned on the Tuesday at the U of I Candidate Forum that you want to encourage a multi-generational community in Moscow. How do you plan to create spaces that facilitate that kind of growth?
Yeah, this is a critical question, and again, this is the value of Moscow, in my opinion. There's lots of people living here, and so how do we create space for that? I think if you're wanting that, some people don't want that, and that's fine. But I think if you're wanting that, it's having to be involved on a variety of different levels. And so for me, how I've done that is it's really just getting involved on the city level with different commissions, but also there are lots of festivities in Moscow that bring people together. And I would say for the most part, I've met some unfriendly characters in Moscow. Well, they won't be named. But for the most part, most people in Moscow are really friendly. And I think the thing that I value about Moscow and why I like raising my family here, it's a place of diversity. And I'm very focused that For example, I go to church every Sunday. I don't think everyone needs to go to church every Sunday either. But our difference is they shouldn't become battle lines. And I think that's the value of having young college students in town, such as yourself, and then have an aging population. It's getting involved and having conversations. And so I guarantee if you go to the farmer's market this week and strike up a conversation with a 75-year-old lady, let's say, that's buying vegetables, I guarantee you could have a friendship there. People are kind, people are polite, and I think it's you getting involved and being persistent about it. It shouldn't really be policy, I think. It should be personal initiative. So, thank you.
All right, thank you very much.
Alrighty, this concludes the candidate forum of Disputatio. Candidates and panelists, you may be dismissed over to the reception at the Sword and Shovel Coffee House and Bookstore. Thank you for your time, and let's give them another applause. Civics Club members, faculty, and staff are invited to that reception after Disputatio has closed. Students, we would like to invite you to our regular Civics Club meeting, which happens once a month on a Monday night, and that's coming this Monday at 7 o'clock in Augustine Classroom. Our guest speaker will be Maggie Elmore, and she'll be reporting on her year serving in the Capitol with American Moment. And lastly, our preview day visitors. You all are requested to remain in the auditorium after everybody else leaves for some closing comments from Nate Miller. And I'd like to welcome up Dr. Erb to lead us in the doxology.